Coming up next, it's me, Mike Gallagher, right after Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. The prospects for GOP unity to move tax reform to the president's desk post haste. Amy, I was at the Notre Dame game on Saturday night.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh, and, exciting game. What, 19-20? Yeah. Georgia?
20-19.
Excuse me. Oh, yeah. 20-19.
Yeah. Because Brian Kelly is the worst play caller in college. Well, Chuck Long now, but Chuck Long, Iowa.
Yeah.
Worst play caller in Division I. He was not too happy at the post-game press conference, probably because people were asking him how he explains being 5-11 his last 16 games with the best offensive talent in the country, which is a fair question. But that's not why I was bringing up the Notre Dame game. I was bringing it up because I saw Paul Ryan there.
Oh, you did?
He's the Speaker of the House, you know.
Yeah, I'm familiar. Fellow Catholic, right?
Yeah, his brother went to Notre Dame. So I guess my understanding is Paul Ryan and his family go to one game with his brother each year, and this was the one. It was triangulated by mean-looking guys with earpieces, so I didn't get very close to him.
Did you wave like, "Hey, Paul, over here! It's Dan Proft"?
I was shouting questions at him, but he wasn't responding. And then I was asked to quiet down and mosey along.
We're going to have to ask you to sit down, please.
So in lieu of Paul Ryan answering my questions directly, we're pleased to be joined by his colleague in the Wisconsin delegation. He is Congressman Sean Duffy, also from north of the Cheddar Curtain. Congressman Duffy, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's great to be with you guys. Almost as good as Paul Ryan, just not quite as smart.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This Plan B. No, we're kidding. You're number one in our hearts. You are, Sean.
We're happy to have Sean. We're happy to have Paul Ryan's understudy. We understand it. No problem.
We remember you from the real world. It's okay.
As you were leading into that, I was thinking, we're going to have some great, hug fest.
No.
While we're hanging out talking tech. No, the security guys kept you away.
Yeah, you think Paul Ryan has time for me? Are you crazy? No way.
I thought so.
No way. But anyway, so I'll ask the questions of you that I would have asked of him. Where does tax reform stand? That's number one.
So it's moving along. You have the House tax team working with the administration tax team in conjunction with the Senate tax team. Now, we've talked a little bit about this, but tax reform has become a little more challenging for us, because we don't have revenue that comes from Obamacare tax repeal, and we're not getting this border adjustment tax, which was about a 20% import tax in the country. So that was about $2 trillion that we now have to make up. And the reason behind that, I don't mean to get too complicated, but we're trying to do this with 51 votes, not the traditional 60 votes. And to do it with 51 votes, tax reform has to be revenue neutral.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out how do we make that happen, but we're making great progress. Now, I don't think you're going to see a corporate rate of 15%, but I think you're going to see something that's sub 25, which is a lot better than 35.
And what about on the personal marginal rate side?
I'm thinking 33 is kind of some of the at the top end is what I've heard. So it's not substantial reductions.
What about in the middle? What about in the middle?
I think you'll see more aggressive middle income tax cuts. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little less love for the wealthy Americans, but we're trying to give tax reform to middle America and lower income Americans.
Were you upset that President Trump? Can you hear me, Sean?
I cannot. But I
sure.
We're well on our way. I mean, it's taking longer than we would have liked. But I think everyone needs to take heart in the fact that the conversations are happening, and it's just I think, Amy, you're probably going to go, what do you think about what happened with the debt deal and so it's important that our teams are working together, and they are, and they're making progress. And the House and the Senate don't want to move ahead of President Trump, because all of a sudden you're going to get mean tweets from the president that might not be so pleasant.
Well, do you think President Trump, sided with Democratic leadership as a form of payback because of the health care bill being shot down by Republicans?
No, but to be clear, the House passed a repeal and replace of Obamacare. we had all but our 3 senators that we needed in the House. We could have lost 2. We lost 3 senators in the Senate, and that's what killed Obamacare replacement. So I think what happened was the president basically there's a strategy. So what you did is we had the debt limit, we had the funding the government, and we had money for Harvey and Irma in one bill. And Democrats were saying we want a short-term, extension. We only want a 3-month deal, and Republicans were saying, well, let's go out, 6 months or a year so we can clear the deck and get tax reform done. Democrats in the end would have voted for a 6-month to a year deal. But instead of playing this out, which was the plan, Donald Trump basically bailed at the last minute and said, I'm going to cut a deal with Chuck and Nancy. And I think the president felt like he was going to clear the deck. And he did for this one moment. But what he's done is he's now given Democrats incredible leverage as we look to trying to get tax reform done, in November and December. They're going to have now the debt limit and the funding of the government all at the same time. I think that was foolish of the president and short-sighted of the president.
On tax reform, I know this can't get too complicated, otherwise you start to have people peel off, but it's a good piece in Washington Examiner by Adam Meyerson talking about the 3% solution as part of the goals of tax reform. And what he's referring to is tax policy that incentivizes more charitable giving to increase our national charitable giving from 2% of GDP to 3% of GDP, which is, turns out to be a huge number. Last year, Americans gave $390 billion to charity. And the idea, of course, is these platoons of democracy, as Burke referred to them, all these civic institutions that separate America from every other country, much more giving nation, much more focused on funding private organizations voluntarily for social services, for schooling, for a range of activities. And wouldn't that make sense to activate that community by encouraging more charitable giving? And you start to have private initiative address some of the societal ills that government has proven it's not particularly good at addressing.
I think that's a great idea. But I think the real driver of tax reform is to say, how do we incentivize American growth again?
Right. But are the two mutually exclusive? The two are not mutually exclusive.
But I do think they are a little bit. I mean, in the sense that we're not getting growth from charitable giving. We're trying to say, our individuals, our churches are going to give to charities that we think meet our morals and our values and accomplish goodwill on issues that I care about. And the government doesn't always do that. Politicians don't spend your money charitably like you would spend your money charitably. But in tax reform, we're seeing American businesses leave our country, taking jobs with them, going to other countries for no other reason that they can't afford to pay the American tax rate. We used to have a competitive tax code, but today the world has far surpassed us. I mean, in Ireland, you're sitting at around 12 and 13% of a corporate rate, and in America, we're at 35%. You can't compete in a global competitive environment when you're paying 3 times as much tax in America as you are somewhere else. And so if we want to encourage American businesses to come home, we have to radically reform our tax code. And that's what we're thinking about. And it's going to move us from the Obama era of 2% or sub 2% growth, getting us up to 3+% growth. And if we do that, our economy explodes. We have people going back to work with better wages. More revenue flows to the federal coffers. We can pay down our debt, and we can do other great projects like building bridges and roads and airports and schools. So I think that's the main driver. How do we help kickstart our economy by letting people spend their money instead of the government spend the money for them?
Yeah, and I'd like to keep more of our paycheck. And it sounds exciting, but how long until it's here? Be honest. Do you think a year from now, 6 months, 9 months?
Listen, you don't have 9 months. You don't have a year. You really have, I would say, 4 months, 5 months right now is the window that we have for tax reform. And so again, if you get the administration, the House, and the Senate, at least on the Republican sides, agreeing to what this tax reform looks like, you're going to see it, I think, hopefully come out in the middle to the end of October. And this can happen, legislatively in a window of, 4 to 6 weeks. So I would argue that, around Thanksgiving, or as Paul Ryan says, if I'm channeling my Paul Ryan, around deer hunting in Wisconsin is when we want this done. And by the way, gun season.
Yeah.
Not muzzleloader or bow season. So
it's an important distinction. Yeah, right.
Yes.
Let me ask you this: does Paul Ryan still enjoy the confidence of most of the caucus?
He does, and so though the media likes to bash him over every problem that comes through the Congress, Paul Ryan is a fantastic leader. People trust him on policy. They trust him on the politics. And though everything doesn't go our way, everyone else likes to blame Paul Ryan, but we all see the sausage making and, who might be at fault for different problems that we have. And rarely do people go, oh my gosh, Paul Ryan is the fault of what's happening in Washington. We see there's other problems that are taking place. And, so no, the quick answer is Paul Ryan does enjoy the confidence of our conference. You have to think about this. We have in the Republican Party, we have very conservative people. You might go look at South Carolina and some guys from Texas, in conjunction with people from New York and California. And those Republicans, some are moderate, some are conservative. You have to be able to bring them all together and agree on a certain set of policies. And they always don't share the same values and priorities that their constituents have. And so it's Paul Ryan's job to go, okay, we got to figure this out. We got to grow together and figure out how we can all get on the same page. And if you look at what happened in healthcare reform, we failed at the start. You saw Paul Ryan put a bill on the floor that he thought enjoyed a lot of support from his conference. When it wasn't going to pass, he pulled it and said, okay, you conservatives in the Freedom Caucus, you're going to sit down with the Tuesday group moderates. You guys figure it out. I'm going to take myself out of this conversation. And when he did that, they actually sat down, they negotiated, they found a compromise amongst themselves, and we actually passed healthcare reform. That was a great growth moment for us in the House. And it's because Paul Ryan had the vision to say, success comes when I step out and let these other members step in and work it out amongst themselves.
All right. He is Congressman Sean Duffy, Republican representative from Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District. Sean, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. And one last message, go Pack Go.
Okay. All right, well, this conversation's going to have to
get
end.
that in. Thanks for the call, Sean. Thanks for joining us, Sean. Appreciate
Eddie
it.
joined us on our Turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot